Welcome to the 240p Club podcast. To my right over here is cracking up Ray.
Hello out there in podcast land.
Ray's trying to hold in some laughs because we just kind of did a take. Got quickly deleted because I sounded like a stuttering buffoon. So,
like you always do.
Yeah, I do.
But we all love you anyway.
That's all.
Just for the record, I am the official stuttering buffoon of 240p Club, and don't you forget it.
I think I'm the stuttering king here.
You guys want to fight for supremacy?
Fight to the death.
I got it!
And you just scared my cat who was reading Nintendo Power.
He's sleeping.
Check our Facebook. There's a funny image, actually, of my other cat, Stormy, the one you didn't see yet on camera. Now he's on camera. We got him laying on a copy of Nintendo Power from 1990. I think summer 1990, something like that. Has a funny catalog in it, actually, of old school Nintendo wares.
A cat-a-log, you say?
Oh. Alright, you have the title of King of Bad Puns.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just the kicker here.
Yeah, you're the kicker. Yeah, we have Nikki here who's taking Taekwondo.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, she's ready to kick your ass.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't kick our fans' asses.
Not unless they piss me off.
Okay.
Anyway, welcome to episode 9, everyone.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that. This is episode 9, isn't it?
999.
No,
we didn't make it that far yet.
Yeah, we have a lot more to go before we reach that plateau.
Yeah.
It's also going to be a tearjerker because that's probably going to be our final episode. Like way down the line.
Nah.
Don't be a Debbie Downer.
Yeah, we'll see how we go. We'll see how this lasts. If it lasts.
857-5309.
We're just full of them today.
Oh yeah, chock full of bad jokes. This is what happens when you're running on like 2 hours of sleep. Yeah. When's the last time I fell asleep? Holy crap.
Last time we played a game, you were out cold.
Oh, maybe that was the last time I slept.
Oh, there you go.
Alright.
Now powered on nothing but water and delusions.
And pizza.
Oh yeah, we did have pizza.
Pizza time.
Yeah. So, what are we talking about today? Because I had a topic and I completely forgot what we were going to talk about.
We were talking about obscure and lesser-known game systems that have unfortunately passed away.
Yeah. These are systems that more hardcore retro gamers definitely know about. I mean, we're not, like, giving away any, like, new information about any of these systems. It's just cool talking about them. Because, me and Ray here, we both had a few health problems here and there. So, once we're fine. No reason to concern, no fan mail, nothing like that. Although PayPal donations are accepted for no reason whatsoever.
So we're not entirely going to talk about the systems that you already know. We've discussed the Sega Genesis, the Game Boy Color, Super Nintendo, all that stuff. Atari. We've mentioned it all before. This is just something a little different.
There's a few other systems out there that over the years, we're focused mainly on like 80s and 90s. We're not really going to talk about the Engage or like all these like the Retrocons or whatever of the worlds where you can play some of these old games. We'll be talking about like it wasn't as obscure. The Neo Geo was kind of not obscure-ish, more exclusive. That's a good word to put it.
Yeah.
Turbo Grafx 16, if anyone remembers that, aka the PC Engine. There's a 3DO system, the CDI. There's a few other systems that, over the years, entered the battle arena between Nintendo and Sega and didn't even really register a beep. But they still have a hardcore following to this day.
The CDI being famous for putting out those terrible, terrible Zelda games.
Yeah, and the Turbo Grafx 16 was famous for Bonk and the first Splatterhouse, a bunch of other really good games.
Also famous for being the first console to have a CD add-on, and over in Japan, that hosted the fifth Castlevania game, of course.
Oh yeah, Rondo
Probably
of Blood.
the most famous fact about the console.
Rondo of Blood, which is a classic. It's even fun to play in Japanese, which you really have to do because the SNES port was pretty jerky and kind of just lousy. But yeah, we'll start with the Neo Geo. During the reign of the 16-bit wars, the SNES and the Genesis, there was another system that came out that was still getting coverage in most video game magazines. It was advertised as a 24-bit system. It wasn't like, that was back when, things were 16-bit and they didn't really mention the bits of other systems. So it was the Neo Geo.
I believe I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but the Neo Geo was basically SNK's hardware that they used for their arcade games, like, smashed together into console form.
Believe it or not, support for that system lasted all the way up until 2004, which meant...
It was about as long as the King of Fighters games lasted.
Yeah, pretty much.
No, considering one had just recently come out, and I don't know if it's extremely popular, but it's pretty popular.
Yeah,
the graphics are terrible.
It's the latest in a series of revivals coming out, like King's Quest. We covered that before.
I think we talked in detail about the Neo Geo's the fighting game licenses and the fact that it's just all fighting games. Because we were mentioning that Capcom decided to make fun of them.
Killer Instinct, I don't think we brought up yet. That's another one.
Killer Instinct started on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, that was Super Nintendo.
Which was also remade for Xbox One.
Well, yeah, because the franchise was acquired by Microsoft.
Yeah, because Rare, Microsoft acquired Rare. Rare had that franchise. And also, Rare was responsible for Donkey Kong Country, and...
That's why we haven't really seen any... Well, I think they did have a Donkey Kong that came out for the Wii, I believe it was. It was a couple of years ago. It was fairly recent. But we haven't seen many Donkey Kongs because of this situation. Yeah,
well, Nintendo still had the license and stuff, obviously. Like, Rare is developing a Nintendo license, but, Rare did most of the programming and software for, the Donkey Kong Country series. As well as a couple other games. They actually first started out as basically, they made game shows in the video games along with LJN, which is, all companies get their start somewhere, But, yeah, we're talking about Rare, Killer Instinct, etc., but the Neo Geo system, actually, I don't think I've ever seen Killer Instinct, but it did see a lot of fighting games. Metal Slug was a game that was on there. The defining fact of the Neo Geo would probably be that it was mostly fighting games and arcade fighting game ports.
It also had Bust a Move.
Yeah, it had Bust a Move. I mean, it had a few games like that. It had a soccer game,
Capcom. Eventually, it would do Capcom vs. SNK.
But that wasn't on the Neo Geo.
No, but that was kind of the precursor to it.
Yeah. Here's the thing that... The system died because, the hardware got obscure. It didn't die because of any competition. It was never considered, part of the big 16-bit wars. And for good reason, because back in the day, that system cost $650, which translated, I think Wikipedia gave me a figure of about $1,100, over a grand for a video game system. So basically, it was just the elite of the elite buying this system.
Nobody's got time for that.
Yeah, and every game costs $200, So basically, for a good-sized library of fighting games, you were going to invest maybe about $2,000, aka maybe about $20,000 in 2016 numbers.
And considering for that price, you could actually just make your way over to Japan and play those games.
Yeah, or just hit the arcade, and because there's a few of those games in the arcade.
Let's not forget the mass amount of shelf space you needed, because these cartridges were fucking gigantic.
Yes. Yeah, they were, it was cartridge based, although they did put out the Neo Geo CD eventually. There's also a Neo Geo Pocket, I believe, or Neo Geo...
It was called the Neo Geo Pocket Color, and it came out around the same time the Game Boy Advance did, I think.
So, they kind of kept with the times a bit, porting some of this hardware over, but for the most, this was just marketed for the elites of the elites of the elites of video gamers. You know, just people that wanted arcade cabinets in their home and couldn't really afford an arcade cabinet.
For that price, you might as well.
Yeah, for that price, you probably could get an arcade cabinet somewhere. But yeah, no, that came out like maybe a little bit before the next system in our discussion here, the 3DO. 3DO was started by some characters from the Electronic Arts company. They wanted to enter the console markets. They had a good idea. This was a giant, like, you know, basically the first version of like a next-gen console. Like, you know, Sega CD was coming out around that time, and, you know, Turbo Duo was out. So they entered with an exclusive CD-based system.
Of course, since this was an early CD-based system, it had a lot of those FMV games like the Sega CD and so forth did, but it was in much higher quality because it was a dedicated CD system.
Some point-and-click stuff, too. Like, that was, like, the meat and potatoes of the early lineup. It's a lot of, like, point-and-click.
Of course, it also had this nice side-scroller called Gex, which I think was, like, the flagship unofficial mascot.
I think I remember
of the system.
Gex.
They made licensing games for this really cheap. Like, you only had to pay a certain amount for royalties on every title made, which was like peanuts compared to what the SNES and Sega Genesis were charging. So this way, you know, they attracted a lot of third-party licenses because that was a game killer for some of the other systems out there, like lack of third-party support. So, you know, they've attracted all these game designers. The only problem with that was that they weren't making any money off said game designers. They were just, like, you know, raking in a couple bucks here and there. So it was definitely not really a money-making venture. And this also cost about $600 around launch. So the system was, like, massively expensive. It was, actually, I think it wound up being a little cheaper than the Neo Geo, but
not by much.
Nah. But it also wound up with a Street Fighter 2 port. I believe it was Turbo on the console, as well as a really kick-ass version of Road Rash that was later ported to PC and PlayStation. It was ahead of its time. The thing that killed the 3DO system itself was it was way ahead of its time. Like, you know, back when the consoles were the big things, like console gaming, not CD-ROM, you know, they put out this technology like way ahead of time. You know, eventually the market caught up with them, and, you know, Sony and Sega had the third-party licenses. So, I mean, you know, that killed it, on top of the price tag, on top of the fact that it wasn't really distributed like a lot of these other systems were. You know, like, you could walk into a Toys R Us and pick up a Super Nintendo. At one point, you could probably walk into there and pick up a Turbo Grafx 16. You know, a very small window of opportunity there, but, you know. But for a 3DO, that you had to mail order, I think.
I'm not sure if, like, any retro game stores would have it.
You know, there's a few that still do. That has a small community. That's the thing. As far as, like, retro gaming goes, I can't really recall the 3DO being mentioned in the same breath as, like, the Neo Geo and the Turbo Grafx. Because, you know, this is probably the more obscure of the systems. The system, when it came out, it got features in, like, major magazines. Like, magazines covered the software. It just never got the distribution. The funny part is, with, like, lawsuits and everything, talking about our next system, Nintendo, in order to combat most of these systems, just decided to develop a CD-ROM for the Super NES. Genesis had one. The Turbo Duo was hanging on, like, as a console/CD-ROM, like, all in one. So, you know, the market was definitely there for them. All these games were coming out for CD systems. Nintendo figured they could do some awesome stuff with CD systems. They wound up, well, they made a deal with Sony first. And then Sony decided to say, you know, screw Nintendo, we're just going to branch out on their own, and that was the PlayStation. Philips had the licenses to some Nintendo games due to the development of this hardware, and when Nintendo double-crossed them, they decided to I believe they sued and were able to keep the licenses, like part of the settlement. Like they were able to put out the Mario games, like Hotel Mario and all those Zelda games for the CDI. My memory of the CDI was I was watching. This was a rainy day. I was home from school. I think I was sick, so I was just sitting at home sick from flipping through channels. Mind you, this is like 1 in the afternoon. There's nothing on but soap operas. Come across like one of those like random channels like with that show. Like basically they showed wrestling at night and they showed really budget shows. Like really budget, and a lot of infomercials. And there was an infomercial for the CDI, and they had these people you can tell have never been near a video game console, just playing like Zelda Gamelon and stuff, and just enjoying life while playing it. Like, this is the most interactive system, this, that, it's amazing. They couldn't mention the Nintendo name though. They just, because everyone knew these as Nintendo licenses, but through the course of the infomercial, the Nintendo, the Zelda game, and I think they had a few other games on there that they were showing off.
The CDI, I believe the bulk of the library for that system was like multimedia titles and, I don't know, Compton's Encyclopedia and stuff like that, right?
Oh, that was another thing they were showing off because, they wanted to make this like, hey, you don't need a PC, you have the CDI.
There's a reason you don't hear about many other games aside from the Zelda and Mario games for that system. It's because there just weren't that many.
Yeah, it was a poorly executed plan. I know they had to release it because Philips had all this CD technology. However, the CDI was never really there as far as third-party licenses. I think they just put it out just because they had the technology and didn't research the market too well.
Those Zelda games always make me laugh.
Yeah, they're infamous now. That system is infamous for Zelda games and for just sucking so bad.
Swadala, we're off!
The best thing about it, though, I can tell you, would be they were not afraid to make a playable Zelda. That's something Nintendo hasn't done up until recently, because a lot of girls play the Zelda game. And maybe they think they might be a little sick of playing with Link. Sometimes they want to play with Zelda. Sometimes they want to play with the many female characters in the series. And Wand of Gamelon, I believe it was Wand of Gamelon.
Yeah, it was fronted by Zelda.
Right, which is really cool. And we wouldn't see a playable Zelda again up until 2014 with Hyrule Warriors. So.
Yeah, I think around that time they were trying to get away from the damsel in distress,
I think they were influenced from the cartoon Zelda, where she was completely badass.
Yeah, I can see that. Maybe that's what they used for their source material.
Yeah.
There's a reason why this system is so obscure these days. Aside from the terrible games, can you name me any other games on the CDI?
Probably not.
Nah, there was nothing memorable.
There was Dark Castle, I think, and that's all I can remember.
I don't.
It was a really, really bad port of Dark Castle for the Macintosh.
These are terrible. Philips, after, I believe that system lasted maybe 2 years, and then they just completely exited the video game market entirely. They were done. It was just, the CDI was just terrible. Terrible system. They exited out of the video game market in
So what happens when you backstab people? They come out with a crappy Zelda game.
Yeah, basically. Nintendo, to this day, disowns any knowledge of that game ever existing, although fans know. And it's officially considered out of canon, never really happened in the Zelda series.
Well, excuse me, princess. Was actually not in any of the CDI games. It was part of the cartoon.
Yeah.
Let's not get things mixed up here.
Which was officially licensed and actually has a DVD out to this day.
Actually, the cartoon was not bad. If you've seen the Street Fighter cartoon, if you've seen the Mortal Kombat cartoon, those are absolutely pale in comparison to the Zelda cartoon.
Yeah, the Zelda cartoon was actually really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, just unlike Philips, 3DO wound up through the 3DO company in '97 wound up abandoning support for the 3DO and turned into a game designer, which made their company last until 2003. 3DO's biggest successes were a game called Army Men, which was ported most famously to PC. It wound up on a PlayStation port too, but it was a PC smash hit. But the 3DO company fell apart in 2003, and that was pretty much the end of them. Yeah, the other systems we were going to talk about, like there's some ancient systems that basically died with the video game crash. There's the Helicon, which was a Laserdisc based system. Only 2 games were ever made for it, and it retailed for $2,000, which was ludicrous in 1982. That was 1982 numbers, $2,000, which, yeah.
Can't believe what it would translate to now.
Yeah, and it cost slightly less if you had a Laserdisc player with the that was compatible with the system, which there's only like 2 or 3 models. So, that system didn't last too long. The Vectrex, which actually was a big competitor to the Atari 2600 right up until '83, like when the video games market crashed. But yeah, they came out a couple months before the crash. They were poised to be a big competitor of the Atari company, Atari 2600, and completely fell apart just due to the crash. No one wanted to buy any video game software anymore. So, poor Vectrex, but at the very least, you could go on eBay and find a working Vectrex for fairly affordable. I mean, depending on how much you want to spend, depending on what kind of condition these systems are in. So, that's definitely worth tracking down. Actually, I'd just put it this way, the most successful of these, I think, would be the Vectrex. The old ones of the 80s. Out of all our obscure consoles, though, I think the most successful one was the Turbo Grafx 16, aka the PC Engine in Japan, which had nothing to do with an actual PC. It was just the name of the system. It was awesome because the Turbo Grafx wasn't a true 16-bit system. It came out before the Genesis, so it was the first official 16-bit system in the country, but it was 2 8-bit processors, so honestly it wasn't really true 16-bit quality, but it was a really good platform for some of the games that Hudson Soft, among other licenses, put out on Nintendo. They had all these licenses, and decided to put these out on their own system instead. You had Bonk's Adventure, I think, was the that was their Sonic, basically. That was their mascot. That was how they were marketing the system. And then you had games like Bomberman, which had a Nintendo game, and it wound up being ported to the TurboGrafx with better graphics, obviously, and different gameplay. And Bomberman and its many sequels, Bomberman 93 and 94, became smash multiplayer hits, because you could buy a link up for the TurboGrafx with a 5-player port, and you could play a 5-player tournament, which... This game is amazing. It was I guess, a puzzle game. You're a little guy. You had to place bombs around the thing and not blow yourself up. And, in order to clear the stage, you had to bomb some walls to find the exit, as well as take out all the enemies with bombs. So, it was kind of like a puzzle game. The other big game, Parasol Stars, it was like a sequel to Bubble Bobble for Nintendo, and Bubble Bobble 2, which is more obscure for Nintendo. And it was a really cutesy game. The TurboGrafx 16 was known mainly, though, for shooters. One ship versus many things. You had Ride Zone, you had Cosmic Fantasy, I think was one. Trying to think what else on the, PC Engine. I'm drawing a blank there. Ride Zone, Fantasy Zone. Yeah, they had a lot of shooters, basically. That was their big thing. And then in '93 decided to put out a CD-ROM system called the TurboGrafx CD, which was, I believe, retailed for $279 or something like that, and it beat out the Sega CD by a year. And, had Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective as a pack-in title, but that was also known for its shooters. Gate of Thunder, Lords of Thunder was like the big one on that. All of these games are well sought after at this point in time. There's a system called the Turbo Duo, which combined the CD-ROM and the console into one just gigantic console, which it was a little more obscure around these parts because the system did really well in Japan, but not so much here in America.
Fairly similar to something that was really big in Japan that didn't really reach the same success over here. And I'm going to jump a little bit more into the future here. Not the future from now, but the future from the Turbo Grafx. The PSP Go.
Oh.
If anyone remembers, the PSP Go only lasted in America for maybe a good couple months or so, if that. The problem is because Wi-Fi wasn't as prominent as it was all over the country as it is now. Wi-Fi was all over Japan, and PlayStation thought, okay, cool. Why don't we put out the system over here in America? Because the concept in itself is cool. It's like, walk around, you pick up Wi-Fi, you just download a game, play it real quick, and do whatever with it.
So it's like a rental system almost, I
think it's you actually have to buy it.
Oh, entire DLC.
Yeah, pretty much. You just completely download the game and play it.
I know they had certain features, like interactive features. I know Final Fantasy VIII had something called the Chocobo Forest, where you had to, use your PlayStation Go to interact with like the Chocobos, and basically that's how you leveled them up. I know that didn't last too long because I really didn't know anyone that had one of those systems, and it was
really hard to find and expensive.
And it was abandoned eventually for the PSP anyway. So
the problem is also they were still trying to market it at places like GameStop, where they were selling it for a pretty big high amount.
Nintendo at the time had the entire console market cornered.
I think at that point they had just put out
the portable console market. Yeah, they had
put out the first version of the DS, I believe, at that point.
No, that would be before. So the PS Go was 98, 99 maybe?
I think
so. That was like the Game Boy Color age. Like Pokemon was just basically released.
Yeah, I think Game Boy Color that might have been earlier. No, Game Boy Advance.
The Game Boy Advance was, in 2000.
Yeah, so they are.
Like the last year, like the Game Boy Color, like Pokemon. I forget
Pokemon Snap, I think it was.
Yeah, there was a couple Pokemon titles released, and also the camera, which took these awful pixelated images.
Pokemon Snap, exactly.
Yep.
No, I'm sorry. Pokemon Snap, I believe, was 64.
Yeah, no, this was it was Pokemon. It was two different. The first sequels to Pokemon.
Oh,
you had Red and Blue, and then
Yellow, and then I think it was Leaf Green.
Yeah, something like that. These were released for the Game Boy Color system,
right? Because then eventually for the DS they would remake Red and Blue and call them, what was it?
Sapphire?
Not
Sapphire is much later.
Much later. No, it was Ruby Red and Sapphire Blue, I think it was.
Something like that, yeah.
It was not Omega Ruby and
I'm not really like a Pokemon expert, so this is like
Heart Gold and Soul Silver, wasn't it?
Gold and Silver?
Yeah, they remade
Gold and Silver were later on, much later on, because I think they remade them as Diamond and Pearl. Or are they completely
different? No, it was
different?
Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Diamond and Pearl was completely different.
Thank you. See, we're actually not Poke experts around here. I am playing Pokemon Go.
I don't play any sort of Pokemon whatsoever.
Yeah, like when people start talking about like I was kind of out of the Pokemon loop, and then I decided to get Black and White when that came out, and people start talking about like naturing and breeding. I'm like, what the hell is all this crap?
I got back into it during Diamond and Pearl.
Yeah, I said, like, what the hell is all this crap? I just know you get Pokemon, you level up whatever team you want to level up, you go to different gyms, you get the badges, you fight the Elite Four, game over. And now all of a sudden it's this hatching eggs, it's naturing, it's breeding, it's whatever. I don't know.
I guess they combined a lot of their ideas, like a Tamagotchi pet, combined with basically Nintendogs, where you had to breed dogs.
Tamagotchi?
Yes, I did.
I went to J1 Con, and there were people selling Tamagotchis there, and I should have bought one.
Wow.
I should have bought one, because I loved my Tamagotchi growing up. Holy shit, and I cried every day when it died.
Yeah, Nintendo combine most of these.
Actually, they had a Pokemon Pikachu Tamagotchi too.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like a little thing, and like you had to collect Poke Points to like I guess buy stuff or whatever, but you had to like shake it. And
so there was a brief period in the 90s where most games coming out were like. They always had to feature like either a card game or like an egg hatching type game sub game to it, like where like you would get rewards in the actual game for some of these, but for the most part it was just basically to turn on your system, boot up the game, collect like points, eggs, something like that, hatch something, breed something, and then turn your system off just so you never forgot the game. Mm-hmm. That was a big thing in like the 90s /2000s, early 2000s.
Mm-hmm. But going back on topic now, because there's too much Pokemon talk.
There's never too much Pokemon talk.
But speaking of Nintendo, wasn't there some sort of portable system they released that failed miserably?
That was the Virtual Boy, designed by the late Gunpei Yokoi.
Who would later go on to release the Wonder Swan in Japan, another failed system, but that's a much more tragic.
Oh god.
Yeah, Virtual Boy isn't as obscure. Nintendo wants you to forget it exists, but no way is that going to happen. Because this was a Nintendo system and a complete Nintendo flop.
I was seeing red for hours after playing that.
Yeah, in case you don't know, it looked like a virtual reality headset, for all you kiddies that don't know about it, I think the Galaxy, Samsung Galaxy phone with the goggles thing, and then you
Google
put it over
goggles.
your head. Yeah, basically it's that thing. Virtual reality they were trying to be big at the time, so, put on goggles, enter this 3D world of this video game. So, unfortunately, in order to make this console even work on the go, Nintendo decided to use two colors, basically black and red. And it fucked with your eyes so badly. It wound up flopping after a while. Like, not even after a while. I think it lasted a holiday season. Like they put
even
it out.
then, it was a flop.
They put it out in time for the holidays, and no one bought this system. Like, and so many units wound up like stuck in store shelves, just waiting to go back to Nintendo. And it cost the designer Gunpei Yokoi his job. He was the mastermind behind the Metroid series. And then he designed the Wonder Swan too.
Mm-hmm. After he quit Nintendo.
Yeah, he designed the Wonder Swan, which I think didn't that have a Final Fantasy port?
It had several Final Fantasy ports. In fact, the first ports of the NES games ever.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Wonder Swan never really went anywhere. I don't even remember any commercials for that back in the day.
That's because it was never released outside Japan.
That could be why, then.
Going back to the Virtual Boy, I remember going to Sears for it, like, just to go in the video game section and see what they had. And there was like no line or nobody playing Virtual Boy, so I said, you know what, let's check this thing out. I lasted not even a minute. I couldn't see anything else but black and red for like 10 minutes.
To be fair, some of the sports titles wound up recycled and redesigned for the Wii, which wound up being a massive success for Nintendo for reasons other than video gaming. Mm-hmm. Like, all these people that weren't into video games decided to go buy a Wii, and, the Wii Fit, Wii Sports, Wii Bowling, you name it, got super huge, and Nintendo made it mint. Although, unofficially, it was still like a third place to Xbox and PlayStation.
Not necessarily. The Wii, actually, when it first came out, was I believe it was outselling.
Yeah, I can see that.
Mainly because the families were all buying.
Yeah, I mean, strictly, video gaming, people were buying for the Xbox, Halo series.
Well, yeah, definitely.
PlayStation,
At
but
that point,
didn't really have much, too many series outside of, what Nintendo designed.
Right, they weren't really doing too many third parties at that point. I believe Xbox had just put out Halo 2 or 3.
Well, Halo was a Microsoft product, so of course they were getting that. Right,
yeah, and then PlayStation, I believe, was banking on the God of War series at that point.
Yeah.
And then the Wii Fit, Wii Sports, and all that. So I believe at that point the Wii was outselling, mainly because the families were all buying it. But if you look at it as actual gamers, there weren't any actual gamers buying the Wii.
No. But yeah, that's going back to Virtual Boy. The sad postscript to that is Gunpei Yokoi was fired from Nintendo, and he wound up, I believe, changing a tire or something, was struck by a car and killed tragically. So he was unable to put any more input into the Metroid series, which is a shame. It's so depressing, because he was the mastermind behind Super Metroid.
When another team started with Metroid, wow, we ended up with Metroid Another M.
Well, God, yeah. Well, you had Prime 2, 3, and then at the same time you had Fusion, which was a true sequel to Super Metroid. It was good. That was really good. And then they did Zero Mission, which is redone version of the original Metroid, completely redesigned, and yeah, it was a fun game. I played through it. The part at the end where you're basically just sneaking around, with nothing but like a phaser to blast space pirates, to stun them. That was ridiculously hard, but it was fun.
I think with Other M, they were trying to make Samus similar to Lightning. It was just no.
Failed terribly. Lightning, of course, from Final Fantasy 13, which...
Woo!
Ugh, terrible.
Mickey's favorite Final Fantasy.
Don't make me come over there.
She will.
I can kick you from this side. Well,
no, you can't. You're short.
You want to say that to me when I got glass in my hand?
I have a glass, too.
You have nothing in your hands.
Help.
Oh, there's plenty of places to hit you.
She knows Taekwondo, so I'm going to leave that alone.
But yeah, I think at that point, Lightning was like the heroine that everyone wanted to be.
Well, yeah, that was marketed more as, I think, an anime than it was an actual game. Mm-hmm. Like, it was marketed for the cosplayers and everything. And, I guess that was the same thing Nintendo did with Other M, and it decided to backfire miserably on them. And, let's not talk about that, because, they were happier Metroid games.
Yeah.
We mentioned the fan-made Metroid remake of Metroid 2, which... honestly, I'd still recommend if you can track that down. It was excellently done.
And Nintendo's been really putting the kibosh on any kind of fan-made games.
This was a Pokemon fan-based title that kind of gotten squelched as well. Sega, on the other hand, Sega, on the other hand, is firmly behind any fan-made version of Sonic the Hedgehog, which happened to celebrate a 25th birthday.
Happy birthday!
Yay!
Yay!
So, we'll dedicate the other part of our podcast to Mr. Sonic, the blue guy. I just remember the commercials back in the day where he had, this stereotypical, parents' resource character telling people not to play Sonic the Hedgehog, and then you just see him, just burst off the screen, and, that basically, bam, all these Sega systems were sold in, a holiday weekend.
Sonic was cool. He just had a cool design, and
and it was a platformer, and it was completely different from anything Mario, was doing, and the gimmick, with him just running across the screen and high speed was just awesome.
He even had his own theme song too.
Yeah, he did.
Cool.
And of course, there were all the imitators like Bubsy and so forth that tried to do the high speed thing and just failed miserably. Because
Bubsy, Aero the Acrobat.
You have to find a balance. You can't just. If you're in a game and you're usually running really fast like that, you're gonna eventually hit something.
You also have Dynamite Headdy, which is actually pretty cool. That was a Sega game. That was actually designed by some of the people that did the Sonic games. And of course, I think a few of them were veterans of the Shining Force series, which we covered in our RPG podcast. Great games. Still playing through Shining Force CD again. But apparently on Twitch it's been Sonic Month. Everyone is trying to stream some type of Sonic game. Sonic Mania, which is a retro-styled brand new game from Sega, coming out for Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. They had a awesome pre-order package featuring a Sonic figurine standing on top of a old school Genesis, as well as a key ring, bunch of other things, awesome.
You mean
collectibles.
GameStop is actually giving out cool pre-orders?
Yeah, well, I think that was more available for Amazon, but I think Best Buy has it. Of course, GameStop has it now. But it's a big retro game. You just see the way it looks. It's obviously designed for a modern system, but in a completely 16-bit style. It looks awesome. I mean, like, I definitely wanted to pre-order this for PC. Looks incredible.
Yeah, there are a lot of Sonic games that were coming out in the past couple of years. Like, I remember when I used to work at GameStop, we had the commercial for Sonic Colors all the time. And it was cute. It was cool.
That's the thing. Like, a lot of people were feeling that the series was kind of going away from what it, started out as. Which, of course, you want to put the whole series in 3D. So,
I believe there was a Sonic game that had come out a couple years ago where it was like
Sonic 4.
Maybe it was.
It was supposed to be 3D-ish, but in like it was 2D, but in a 3D-ish type world.
I think it was that, or there was like some that was in 3D, and then some of it was back in 16-bit. I think it was. Maybe it was Sonic 4.
Also, like for most virtual consoles, you had the remake of the Sonic game for Dreamcast, which the title escapes me right now.
Yeah, it wasn't Sonic Adventure. I'll tell you that much.
No. Yeah, no, it was really not like there was a big uproar for the Sonic games to be done in the 16-bit style again, kind of similar to what Capcom did with Mega Man 9 and 10. They wound up designing officially a new game, Sonic Mania. But yeah, no, Sonic has been around since 1991. It was the first. Before we had downloadable content, they had the add-on technology, which is only used in Sonic and Knuckles. So basically, you had a copy of Sonic and Knuckles. You plug that into the Genesis. You play Sonic and Knuckles. You had a copy of Sonic 3. You could actually plug it into the Sonic and Knuckles cart and play a massive Sonic game, spanning like 2 carts basically at this point. You could also plug in Sonic 2 and use Knuckles in Sonic 2, but that was more of a gimmick than anything. And depending on what you had around your Genesis library, if you put in like a game and you hit A and C and start, you get to play all the secret stages randomly designed from the carts that you put in, which is really cool.
That was the original Mixed Joy idea.
Original downloadable content, as I've seen
Woo!
it. So yeah, no, the Sonic series has been around for 25 years and ported many times to many systems. I still remember getting the Game Gear port, which was hard as could be. Sonic 2 I'm talking about. The first Sonic game was kind of easy, to be honest with you. Sonic 2, though, for the Game Gear was ridiculously hard. I still haven't beaten it to this day. It's that hard. But I remember playing it for hours trying to figure it out. That was a game that just drew you in, That was such a good game, though. Yeah, Sonic was Sega's answer to Mario and dominated the 16-bit wars for a number of years, thanks to the strength of the Sonic games. And, obviously he made an appearance in certain other games. Trying to think
offhand. He was in
offhand.
Super Smash Brothers, the most recent.
Well, after a while, yeah.
The franchise kind of came crashing down for a while, like in the 2000s, didn't it?
I mean, but
coming out with like some not so favorable,
not so quality games, but they wound up like recovering a bit with
Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 were actually well received at their time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when Sonic Heroes and everything up until Sonic 2006 came out that they just got worse and worse progressively.
The ones for the DS were really good, though. Not the DS, Game Boy Advance, I think, had a couple titles. They were really good. They were old school Sonic games.
I remember the Sonic cartoon also.
Oh, yeah. They had 2 of them. Mm-hmm. I don't know what happened with the licenses, but Deke, whatever. Deke, D-I-C, had the licenses to 2 separate Sonic cartoons. One was based heavily off the comic book and was like really dark, dystopian world. Robotnik took over, and the other one was just a goofy, like slapstick cartoon. Sonic in both was voiced by Jaleel White,
who will always to me be the voice of Sonic. I don't care who else voices him; he is Sonic.
Jaleel White kind of made Sonic, his own, and was actually the only role I think he ever had that got him away from the shadow of his Urkel role from Family Matters, which was why you'll never see him in a lot of movies anymore. But, he basically, it took the Sonic character to new dimensions.
If I remember, the more darker Sonic series didn't really last too long. If I remember, it was like a couple
ABC,
decided it wasn't too family friendly.
Yeah, and they kept moving it to compete with Power Rangers, which actually no, it's the other way around. I think Power Rangers was moving time slots to compete with Sonic.
That series, the Saturday morning one, lasted for 2 seasons. They had an ending that tied up all the loose ends, and then just decided to throw a cliffhanger in out of nowhere.
I think I remember watching that cartoon. I seem to remember
if I remember right, is it still on Netflix?
Yeah, I believe it's still on Netflix.
I would have to watch another episode just to get a refresher.
It was really good. As far as cartoons based on licenses, I believe there's another Sonic cartoon out there more recently.
I believe so.
But I've never watched it, so I can't really give it a review. But I think that came on Sunday mornings. That was a Sunday morning cartoon. Most Sonic licenses these days are quality. Sonic Mania is going to be really good. And happy birthday, Sonic.
Happy birthday!
And we will be doing a Twitch playthrough of some sort of Sonic game before the end of the month. Absolutely.
We'll figure out which one. Actually, better yet, how about you decide?
Yeah, why don't you go out there, hit us up.
I have a copy of Sonic 2006.
Oh, man. Alright, well, we will be doing that then. We will be playing that as well as wherever our fans want us to play. Hey, out there in podcast land, if you're listening, head over to 240pclub.com. We're all linked up there, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. You name it, we have it on our website related to this podcast. You also go to facebook.com/240pclub. Just give us some feedback. Just post on our page hey, you guys should play this Sonic game. We'll respond with okay, or thank you, or something awesome.
Thank you for your kind words.
Yeah, awesome. Or thank you for your criticism if you're trying to troll us.
Oh, yeah,
we'll take that too.
It's like when people used to call my store, hey, do you have Battletoads? That was...
Yeah, you're about a decade off there.
No, really. When I used to work at GameStop, and I had only stopped working at GameStop last year, I used to get phone calls of people asking me if we had Battletoads.
Dear Lord.
I had someone ask me if we had Super Mario 64, and I said yes, just to mess with the guy. I never thought that he would walk in through that door. He walked in through that door 10 minutes later.
Oh my god.
But you know what? My coworker saved my ass because apparently Super Mario 64 was out on the DS. So I'm like, I forget who my coworker was, but hey, if you're listening, high five.
Awesome.
Because you just saved my ass. Well, you saved my ass, though. It's about you. And you're probably not listening, but hey, you're cool. I remember all the coworkers I work with. Well, I don't remember all of them, but if I remember you, it's probably because we were cool.
So, next week on the 240p Club, we haven't decided what we're going to talk about yet, but, we may have another top 10 list coming soon.
If you have any ideas, though, anything you would like us to discuss, anything you want to discuss
anything retro gaming related, feel free to ask us. We'll research it. We'll discuss what we remember from back in the day, at least. Anyway, cheers till next week. We are Metallic Joe.
Nikki!
Ray.
And
good night!
Good night, everyone.
Moshi moshi!
Bye.